Rajalakshmi Engineering College, and he did its BE from Electronics and Communication Engineering from Vailtech Multitech Engineering College. And he has a work experience. He has also worked in industry, HTC Global Solutions, and also he worked in GRT Institute of Engineering and Technology and SRM Institute of Science and Technology as a research assistant. And currently he is doing research, and also he is a assistant professor in Chennai Institute of Technology. And the roles and responsibilities is establishing a center for nanotechnology and involved in publishing SCI journals, along with writing proposals to various funding agencies. And I'm very, very happy to announce his achievements and awards. He is a recipient of Srishti Gandhian Young Technological Innovation Award in the year 2020, titled Development of Portable Gas Analyzer for the Detection of Acetone in exhaled breath components for non-invasive diabetic or diabetes diagnosis. This is a wonderful contribution by Dr. Ramji, and also he has secured gold medal for research presentation titled Development of Portable Gas Analyzer for the Detection of Acetone in Exhaled Breath Components for Non-Invasive Diabetes Diagnosis at Research Day in 2019 at SRM Institute of Science and Technology. And he has published so many papers related to his work. And he has also filed and published a patent on an instrument for determination of acetone in exhaled air. Very big applause for Ramji for this. And I would like to welcome Ramji for today's session. And he is going to cover the design of acetone breath analysis and also the nanosensor array, its preparational procedure, material characterization, fabrication and validation, incorporation in a portable breath analyzer, and acquisition of clinical trials. So we are very eager to listen from you all that you have done in your research and how this is going to be useful in a normal fashion. Please share your screen. Dr. Ramji, welcome you for this webinar.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the introduction and thank you for your motivation and congratulations, ma'am. So good evening, all. We are going to look about how really a disease can be diagnosed from the components that is available in breath. I'll focus on acetone for diabetes, and from there, after the discussion, we'll branch out to other biomarkers with other diseases. For example, ammonia with renal failure. And for lung cancers, numerous type of cancers and all other diseases. So from exhaled breath components consist of more than 200 volatile organic compounds that depend on the biochemical process that happens inside our blood. And all that blood, as it flows through the body, it pulls all the components, that is volatile organic components, and it interacts with lungs so that the volatile, it escapes from the lungs and appear in exhaled breath. So this is the pre-concentrated unit where a separate research is going on in this pre-concentrated unit. What it does is, it has an absorbent. For example, let me tell you an absorbent, carboxyl 1010. It is from Sigma Aldrich. An industry named Sigma Aldrich is manufacturing carboxyl 1018. And they specifically tells that it absorbs and desorbs acetone alone among other gases that are present. So once it absorbs and desorbs only acetone, we have a sensor here. This is made of a nanomaterial. So that sensor would selectively sense acetone, and with the data acquisition system, we acquire the breath print of patients for healthy as well as diabetic. We pre-process the data, extract characteristic features, that is absorption kinetic features, and based on that, we classify into healthy or diabetic based on all these characteristic breath print features. So in this lecture, we are going to concentrate on the preparation of this nanomaterial based sensor. And this is the idea for the future work, for pre-concentrator work. So we have divided our presentation into 6 different sections. The first one deals with the introduction, that is the prevalence of diabetes globally in Asia and as well as in India. And how breath analysis, is it really reliable? Is it feasible? It is the direct reflection of disease that has been identified. And section 2 deals with the preparation and characterization of gas sensing material, that is the nanostructured chemiresistive material. Nanostructured, I'll repeat it, nanostructured chemiresistive material. So the name insists that based on the chemical compounds, the resistance of this gas sensing material changes. Okay, so how do we prepare and what are its material properties that are really required that is favorable for gas sensor application? And then after preparing it and characterizing it, so we fabricate it based on all the lithographic process which we have come across, physical vapor deposition and chemical vapor deposition, such kind of fabrication procedures, and validation of the prepared sensor. Validation here means that once the sensor has been ready, we have to measure its response based on the known concentrations of acetone and other interfering biomarkers in the presence of humidity and how stable the response is, how fast is the response and recovery time. So all those sensor parameters, basically we name it as 4S: sensitivity, selectivity, stability, and speed. So we have to validate all these sensor parameters by giving the known concentrations of acetone and other interfering biomarkers. After validating it and after finding out it has given a good response, we incorporate those sensors into a portable breathalyzer and use it for clinical trials. So after acquiring breath print, after all those ethical clearance procedure and acquiring breath print from healthy and diabetic, we extract characteristic features specific to breath print and classify it into healthy and diabetic breath print using an artificial neural network. And at the last section, we summarize all these and provide suggestions for the future work. So the first one is diabetes and its prevalence. So it has been characterized by an elevated blood glucose level. If the glycated hemoglobin HbA1c is 48 millimole per mole or higher, fasting blood glucose 120 mg per dl or higher, 2 hours postprandial random blood glucose concentration 200 mg per dl or higher, it has been the subject has been diagnosed into diabetes. So it has been further classified into type 1, type 2, pre-diabetes and gestational diabetes. Our focus is on type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So type 1 diabetes, it is the inability of the pancreas to secrete insulin due to the damage in their beta cells. So type 1 is the inability of the pancreas and type 2 is the insulin insensitivity. And this occurs due to the regular similar food intake. So this leads to, as the glucose content in blood increases due to type 1 and type 2 diabetes, the viscosity of the blood increases. As the viscosity increases, the blood flow decreases and hence the blood will not reach the extremities, and that leads to the complications like glycoma, foot ulcer, cardiovascular problems and all those things due to the only problem, the viscosity, the increase in the viscosity of the blood. And WHO has identified that diabetes mellitus is the 7th leading cause of death, which has caused 4 million deaths in 2017 alone. This is what we have, half of what we are witnessing currently for COVID-19. So this is silently killing people. And from 108 million in 1980, it has been increased to 424 million. The global diabetic population has been increased to 424 million in 2017. And causes an health expenditure of $727 billion in 2017 alone. 49% of global diabetic population is in India. And Indian Council for Medical Research has done a study in 2 phases from 2000 to 2006 and between 2008 and 2014 had identified even children below 10 years of age is acquiring type 1 diabetes. So type 1 and most commonly type 1 diabetes, they need to check the blood glucose level to administer the efficacy of insulin that is being given. So researchers across the globe had identifying a non-invasive approaches. Like Google Lens is trying for identifying the indirect identification of blood glucose in eye tear, sweat analysis, saliva analysis. So there are a lot of non-invasive procedures that is being researched. Breath analysis seems feasible for us due to its ancient Greek physicians' practice. So from that they had ideated that aroma of the breath provides certain clue about disease diagnosis. So this came into picture when modern analytical techniques such as gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, and ion mobility spectrometry, all kind of analytical techniques had identified that 3000 during 1970s. Pauling and his colleagues has identified 3,500 compounds detected using these several techniques which we are talking about, varying from hydrocarbon till organic sulfides. So there are further classifications on alkane, alkene, and alkyne. There are further subclassifications in each and every that is reported on the table. So this varies from person to person based on their biochemical pathway. And this varies from parts per million to parts per billion, each and every compound. Each and every compound varies from parts per million to parts per billion. It is like finding a white ball. It is like finding a black ball among a white ball covered in a size of football field. So from the name, it indicates that it is parts per million. Okay, 5 parts in 1,000, in million parts affair, like that. So it is. So the sensor design should be very sensitive, and this depends on the biochemical pathway. So a review literature has identified that a combination of 54 different volatile organic compounds from the 3,500 which you are talking about, a combination of 54 different VOCs has been identified to 17 different diseases that varies from COPD, asthma till heart failure. So renal failure for ammonia. See, basically renal failure, it does not filtrate urea. So urea in presence of urea in blood is being converted into ammonia. And asthma, nitric oxide is associated with asthma. Similarly, dimethyl sulfide, hydrogen sulfide with halitosis, acetone with diabetes, which is our primary focus. So how blood glucose is being converted to breath acetone? This is through a glycolysis process. So through the glycolysis process, blood glucose is being converted into pyruvate, and decarboxylation of pyruvate, elimination of single carbon atom from pyruvate is being converted to acetyl-CoA. Decarboxylation of acetyl-CoA is responsible for all the compounds present here. That is acetoacetate, acetone, and beta hydroxybutyrate. All these three are ketone bodies, and this research has identified that 96% of the ketone bodies that is being exhaled is acetone. So we focus on acetone here, and the threshold concentration between healthy and diabetic is 1.8 ppm. We'll see that in the forthcoming slides, how the threshold concentration is being established, and how reliable, why should we go to breath analysis and why not other modes, and how feasible it is. So along with this, we have challenges. Out of 100% of the exhaled breath composition, 78% is nitrogen, 14% is oxygen, 4 is carbon dioxide, and the remaining 4% constitutes of the 3,500 volatile organic compounds we are talking about. So this is the first challenge we face here. And the next one is breath acetone not only varies with blood glucose level, but also with age and exercise, ketogenic diet and fasting, fat loss and weight loss. So along with the disturbance from the environmental acetone. So there are number of factors that is been that is providing us a challenge to identify, to quantify the composition, acetone composition. And in addition to this, humidity from exhaled breath, which is somewhere around 95% relative humidity that human tends to exhale, humidity is getting exhaled. That gives us a fake, false response along with these challenges present. So this becomes even difficult, like finding a gray ball among a white balls covered in the size of the football field. So, these are the existing technologies, that is gas chromatography and mass spectrometry, which we are talking about. Here we have a mobile phase and a carrier phase. Mobile phase consists of the breath samples. So numerous compounds that are present in a single breath sample. That is, for example, 200 compounds are being present. So based on the stationary phase and the mobile phase, it reaches the detector at certain time, at certain different times based on the mass of the particular compound. So that mass is the x-axis, and y-axis is the concentration of that particular compound here. Similarly, here in the mass spectrometry, the breath sample is given as an input here, and after ionization, there is a magnet here. So based on the mass of the compound, it takes a longer path, a medium path, short path, and it reaches the detector at different intervals. So x-axis is the mass and y-axis is the concentration of that particular compound. So numerous studies starting from 1970s, they had started identifying what are the biomarkers for these particular diseases. They take a random sample of 100 healthy and 100 diabetic and check what are the compounds present. And all these studies have come to a conclusion that all the human beings tend to exhale acetone with a baseline of 0.5 ppm. So 1.8 ppm is the threshold concentration, below which it is safe zone, and 1.8 ppm and above it is considered as type 2 diabetes. So 21 ppm and above it is type 1 diabetes. So these are the threshold concentration that has been established by the current analytical techniques. But what is the problem? Why cannot we use this existing technologies for diagnosing disease? So that That is, it requires a small sample size. It can differentiate between isotopes, and it is high. It has high resolution, accuracy, and sensitivity. But the demerits, these are the reasons we cannot use it for a current clinical practice. That is, it takes more than 45 minutes to 1 hour to analyze a single breath sample. So there is a Tedler bag where the patient has been asked to exhale into that particular Tedler bag. When a single sample is been using 1 hour, we cannot collect all the samples in a Tedler bag. There is a chance that vital compounds may escape, or it may react with the Tedler bag, and it may give false response. So hence huge data cannot be recorded due to this high response time, and it is not portable. It required a trained technician to operate, and hence does not support point of care. So even if the patient is unconscious, there is a need to measure the glucose level or any vital parameters. So this is the first research technique, photoionization detectors. So before getting into the principle of this, currently we are using a capnography, an instrument named, currently that is used in hospitals to measure the concentration of carbon dioxide from exhaled breath. So based on the concentration of carbon dioxide, anesthesia is administered accordingly. So this photoionization detector, we have a vacuum gas cell here, and there are two reflecting mirrors on both the ends. So when a single pulse of laser is being given, and when the breath sample is being infused into this vacuum gas cell using this Tedler bag, so this 266 nanometer laser reflect both front and back on this reflecting mirror, and after a certain point of time, it gets nullified. So that is the decay time, that is the ring down time. So that ring down time is directly proportional to the concentration of that particular compound. But the problem here is there is no single wavelength of laser that is being selectively absorbed by any compounds. So meaning that there is a selectivity issue in the photoionization detector. That is, for example, acetone does not only absorb 266 nanometer wavelength. In other words, 266 nanometer laser wavelength is not only absorbed by acetone, it is also absorbed by ammonia and all other vapors. So there is a selectivity issue in photoionization detectors, and moreover, it is of high cost. So this comes as a cantilever principle, quartz crystal microbalance, the next research technique. So Professor Dr. Ram Gopal Verma from IIT Bombay has acquired fund during 2004 to 5 for detecting myocardial infection using this principle, and they had come up with an incubation, NanoSniff Private Technologies. So that is an incubation from IIT Bombay. So here it is fixed at one end and free at the other end, and the analyte binding material is quoted here. This is the nanostructured material which we are talking about. And upon the infusion of breath, it operates in two modes, static mode and dynamic mode. And upon the infusion of breath samples, and based on this analyte binding material, this cantilever slightly bends. This change in the distance is in the range of micrometers and nanometers. So, and the second mode is dynamic mode. This free end is being made to vibrate at a certain frequency. And when upon the infusion of breath sample, the frequency, the resonant frequency is reduced based on the concentration. So these are the two modes, and the change in deflection and the resonant frequency can be identified using all of the deflection detection methods that is being listed here. So we got an opportunity to travel to IIT Bombay, this NanoSniff Private Technologies, and we found out the device is huge. It is not portable, and people from NanoSniff told us that they use it in static mode, but generally dynamic mode is very sensitive compared to static mode. Even for static mode, the setup is very big. So we thought of looking into some other ways, and that is chemiresistive transducers. Based on the chemical compounds, the resistance changes. And what chemicals depends on the material that we prepare. So the basic principle of operation here is redox reaction. Initially, at ambient atmosphere, that is at room temperature, we have oxygen in the at an ambient temperature. So we have the sensing material. So this atmospheric oxygen takes electron. Since the electronic configuration of oxygen, it has two lone pair of electrons. It tends to stabilize, and it tends to stabilize and takes electrons from the sensing material. Okay, since it had two lone pair of electrons. So as it takes electrons, the resistance of the material is high. See, at the ambient air, the resistance is high here. Okay. So there is no free flow of charge carriers when the electron from the sensor material is being taken. So at certain elevated temperature and upon the infusion of acetone, the acetone has the tendency of donating electrons. It is a reducing agent. It donates electrons. So as it donates electrons, the resistance decreases. Initially, the resistance is high because the atmospheric oxygen takes the charge carriers from the sensor material. Hence, the resistance is high. Acetone reducing property, hence the resistance decreases. This change in resistance is directly proportional to the concentration of that particular compound. So this change in resistance. Hence, the relative response is here is resistance in air divided by resistance in gas. So that is the relative response. So with this principle, we study how stable it is and how selective it is compared to other interfering biomarkers, and what is the speed of the response, and all those things we study here. So for this nanostructured chemiresistive transducer, metal oxide nanostructure has been a choice, and it has been studied, explored from a long time due to its capability of sensing variety of gases varying from oxidizing to reducing gas, and moreover there are numerous material choices that could be explored. So this metal oxide semiconductors has been used here. So I'll rush up through the literature survey. So this has been ZNO metal oxide semiconductor has been operated at 300 degrees Celsius with a response of 18.6 to 100 ppm of acetone. But the axial breath concentration range is 1.8 ppm and 20 ppm. This is higher compared to what is in the axial breath concentration range. And the response time is 7 seconds. That is for gas chromatography, it is 45 minutes to 1 hour. So we have reduced that, and this becomes portable. These advantages, we go for a nanostructured chemiresistive semiconductor material. And the second semiconducting material is tungsten oxide with carbon doped tungsten oxide. Here they have achieved the detection limit down to 0.2 ppm with a operating temperature of 300 degrees Celsius. This operating temperature is required to initiate the reaction between the sensor material as well as the compounds. That is at elevated temperature, during the principle which you have seen in the previous slides. And it is selective to acetone compared to methanol, ethanol, and ammonia. These are the biomarkers for renal disease, for lung cancer, and all the other biomarkers, and can handle 95% humidity, which is a primary property for diagnosis through exhale breath. And the third metal oxide is tin dioxide. So here tin dioxide, they had reduced the temperature down to 200 degrees Celsius, but the response and the recovery time has increased. So there is a trade-off between the operating temperature and the recovery time. If the operating temperature is more, we need more power. Hence we again rely on power supply, which becomes not suitable for portability. So there is a trade-off between this operating temperature and the response time. And the fourth one is this cobalt oxide nanostructured chemiresistive material. Here they had studied for 100 ppm with the response of 6.1 at 160 degrees Celsius. And they explored what morphology, that is what structure of this nanomaterial would provide higher response. So they studied nanosheet, nanorod, and nanofiber, and found out this nanosheet provides better response. And they attribute their surface to volume ratio. Sheet, it is a 2D material compared to nanorod, which is a 1D, and nanofiber, which is a 1D material. This nanosheet is a 2D material, hence has high surface to volume ratio. And they had reduced the temperature with the increase in the response and recovery time. So we need to take care of all these working temperature and response and recovery time. So not only these 4 metal oxide semiconductors, there are numerous metal oxide, for example, iron oxide, numerous metal oxide that has been explored. But the research gap that lies here is all these nanostructured metal oxide material is being validated and is being stopped. It is not taken to further clinical trials. But certain studies which have gone to clinical trials with this nanostructured material used commercial gas sensors. So we wanted to explore from powder processing till clinical monitoring prototype. So we framed our objectives into synthesizing a novel chemiresistive sensor material, and the same material with 2 different synthesis procedures. We wanted to estimate what are its changes in the structural, same material with different procedures. So what are its structural properties and what are the changes in their sensing performances. And the third one is to fabricate and validate these sensors with the humidity, other interfering biomarkers, and estimating its resistance at ambient atmosphere and at threshold acetone concentration, which is 1.8 ppm, and develop a portable prototype using a voltage divider circuit by a simple measuring circuit with incorporation of these sensors for clinical trials. And so along with the breath response, we also got the biochemical golden standard biochemical data for comparison. So with that HbA1c value and with the highly statistically significant sensor resistance indices, we established an empirical formula for estimation of HbA1c with the sensor indices, with the sensor responses, to compare this test with the standard biochemical test and extract features that are specific to breath signal, that is absorption kinetic features. We'll see that in the forthcoming slides, and rank them to eliminate the redundant features which would not give quite a better result, and perform a Naive-Bayes classification. So here we will discuss about how we have prepared and characterized the gas sensing material. So TGS 822 is a commercial sensor. This sensor is in picture starting from 1990s. So this is a commercial sensor from a Japanese company named Figaro. So they used tin dioxide nanostructured material for selective sensing of acetone between 50 ppm to 5000 ppm. But that is necessary to go down for healthcare applications. And moreover, this metal oxide sensor offers the possibility for easy fabrication methods. We'll discuss the fabrication methods and miniaturization that leads to portability, simple measuring electronics, that is based on a simple voltage divider circuit. We were able to measure the we were able to incorporate it in a portable prototype, and it's economically sustainable as we go for mass production. So how do we go down till 0.5 ppm or 5 ppm? Is that by using the graphene oxide, which is a buzzword currently in electronics and all other electronic components that is coming out. So graphene oxide and metal oxide, they have a synergistic property between them in terms of structural as well as in terms of electrical properties. So structural properties we'll see during the characterization, and electrical properties we'll see during the validation. What is the synergism that exists between metal oxide and graphene oxide? So the first one, we have prepared a graphene oxide material using the modified Hammers method. We have a flake graphite that is being purchased from Southern India Scientific, that is here at nearby. So we powdered that using an agate mortar, and 2 grams of powdered flake graphite with 1 gram of sodium nitrate is stirred in the presence of 60 ml concentrated sulfuric acid for 45 minutes in the presence of ice bath. So at this step, we observed a vigorous effervescence, and then we slowly added potassium permanganate, 6 grams of potassium permanganate, stirred for 30 minutes at room temperature. Here we have obtained a brownish gray slurry, and then we slowly added 92 ml of DI water. Here we have observed a brownish slurry and stirred for 30 minutes at room temperature, and then we added 80 ml mild hot water plus 3% hydrogen peroxide. So the solution is being transferred to 50 ml centrifuge tube, and it is centrifuged at 6000 rpm in the presence of HCl, DI water and ethanol. So after this centrifuging, the nucleated graphene oxide from this graphite flakes, after all these procedure, the nucleated graphene oxide sheets get settled at the bottom. These graphene oxide sheets get settled at the bottom, and unreacted metallic salts along with these solvents is at the top. So we filter it, and the settled graphene oxide sheet is overnight dried at vacuum for 60 degrees Celsius. So this will be in the form of amorphous powder when you see in the naked eye. Black color amorphous powder. And this is our first sensor material, preparation of graphene oxide, tin dioxide nanocomposite. Tin dichloride pentahydrate is the precursor for the formation of tin dioxide. So 5:1 ratio, we have taken a 5:1 stoichiometric ratio. This study here has found out that 5:1 of graphene oxide and metal oxide would provide a selective detection for acetone. So we use the same stoichiometric ratio. The name solvothermal method is, since we use the solvothermal method isopropanol 30 ml sonicated for 1 hour. So in the presence of isopropanol, if we sonicate the nucleated graphene oxide and this tin dioxide precursor, we obtained a dispersed solution, and then we slowly added 1 ml of DI water while stirring at 30 minutes at room temperature. This solution is being transferred to 50 ml Teflon line autoclave, and it is maintained at 180 degrees Celsius for 16 hours in a muffle furnace. 180 degrees Celsius for 16 hours. After cooling down to room temperature, we again transfer it to 50 ml centrifuge tube, centrifuged at 6000 rpm in the presence of DI water and ethanol. The nucleated nanocomposite, that is GeoSNO2 nanocomposite, is settled at the bottom, unreacted metallic salts at the top, overnight dried at vacuum for 60 degrees Celsius to obtain the material GOSNO2. This is an amorphous black powder. So this is our first sensor material. So this slide discusses about the same sensor material, that is same graphene oxide, tin dioxide, by two different synthesis procedures. First one is one-pot solvothermal method, which we have discussed in the previous slide. That will be represented as GS1 from this slide. And the second one is two-pot hydrothermal method. So this is the simple illustration of the work that we have discussed in the previous slide, one-pot solvothermal. Here what we did is two-pot hydrothermal method. First we have prepared a graphene oxide using Hammers method, and the second one is during with the help of hydrothermal method, hydrothermal. The name insists that we use DI water here. Same tin oxide precursor, maintained at muffle furnace, transferred to autoclave, maintained at this temperature and duration, cooled down to room temperature, transferred to centrifuge tube. All the same procedure. We obtained a nucleated metal oxide nanoparticle here. We mechanically mixed here, in the sense that is graphene oxide 100 mg, tin dioxide 20 mg is being dispersed in DI water. So that is mechanical mixing. So here in this step, this tin dioxide is being nucleated in the presence of graphene oxide. But here both prepared separately and it's been mechanically mixed. So this will be represented as GS2 from this slide. And the third sensor material is graphene titanium dioxide. The same procedure. The change is we use titanium dioxide precursor here, that is TTIP, titanium tetraisopropoxide here. And the fourth sensor material is a ternary nanocomposite. The first three is binary, this is ternary. So we use both the tin oxide and titanium dioxide precursors here for the preparation of this ternary nanocomposite. This will be this sensor, the fourth sensor will be addressed as GST. So all these sensors will be in the form of amorphous powder. So we need certain material characteristics that should be favorable for sensing acetone. Being in nano structure, we are not aware how effectively it is being formed, whether it is really formed from the precursor, that is from tin dichloride pentahydrate to tin oxide, we are not aware. So we have certain characterization techniques. So the first one is X-ray diffraction pattern. The black curve here is associated to graphene oxide peaks. We have a lookup table, a separate lookup table. These values can be seen in the literature as well. So this is the 2 theta value here. So for example, if there is a peak at a particular point, it is being associated to 002 plane. So we look up to JCPS card number or the existing literature, and it is being matched to that particular peaks here. So the difference which you are talking about, same material, two differences in this procedure, we can observe that the peak here for GS1 is intense and narrow, but here it is broadened for GS2. And 110 is the dominant peak for SNO2 compared to 101 and 301. This is considered as the dominant peak. And for TiO2, 101 is the dominant peak. 101 is the dominant peak. And for ternary composite, we can see the characteristic peak of both tin and titanium dioxide. Tin and titanium dioxide for the ternary composite. So what XRD tells us is, from the original precursor, the material has been formed, the nanostructure material has been formed, and other inference, that is narrow intense peak, and other certain inference we can observe from XRD. That is the crystal size, and the XRD, the analysis of the XRD is like an ocean. Here for gas sensing, we also identify this change here. And this is the microscopic images of the prepared material. This is graphene oxide and reduced graphene oxide. So graphene oxide is usually a wrinkled 2D structure, a single sheet of carbon, here. So for high resolution images, we will go to the high resolution images, but this is the scanning electron microscopic images of GO and reduced graphene oxide. This is for GS1, GS2, GT and GST, all the 4 sensor material. Even though the structural characteristic is not evident here, we can appreciate the structural synergism between the graphene oxide and the metal oxide here. So imagine what if metal oxide is not present here. All the graphene oxide sheets tend to agglomerate, tend to restack due to the van der Waals force here. So if it restacks, there won't be enough surface to volume ratio for the gas to get absorbed. So on the vice versa, if only nanoparticles is present and not the graphene oxide is absent here. In this case, what happens? All the nanoparticles tend to agglomerate and it becomes a big particle size. So in the next slide, I'll show you. This is for GS1, GS2 and GST. Here the tin and titanium dioxide is being uniformly distributed over the graphene sheet. This is the graphene sheet that has been observed here. So this is the graphene sheet. This is the graphene. For GS1, the tin dioxide is being uniformly distributed. For GS2, it has been agglomerated. See, if there is no graphene oxide, even in GS1, it will be agglomerated like this. So hence, there won't be a lot of surface to volume ratio. So surface to volume ratio is important for the gas to get. If it is high, more amount of gases will get absorbed, and the change in the resistance accordingly. So this is the structural property. Same material, different preparation procedure. See the structural changes here. And the third one is Fourier transform infrared spectra. This characterization study is required to identify the surface functional groups. So what are the functional groups that are present on the surface of the sensor material, so that the gas molecules get adsorbed between them. So even we have a lookup table for this. So for all the 4 sensors, from 3400 to 1180, we have common peaks that has been attributed to hydroxyl functional group C double bond C. So these functional groups are necessary for the acetone to get chemisorbed. So there are 2 kinds of adsorption that takes place in gas sensor. One is chemisorption, the second one is physisorption. So chemisorption is strong, physisorption is a weak force. That is, it occurs due to the van der Waals force, which is in the range of 10 power minus 10 newtons. That is, the force of van der Waals force is 10 power minus 10. So for to ensure that acetone can get absorbed using a chemisorption, we study FTIR and all these. And this is the characteristic peak of tin and titanium dioxide. Similarly, here compared to GS1, there is a shift in this tin characteristic peak to a lower frequency. This means that, for example, SN and O is present. It is being vibrating at a certain frequency, stretching and bending vibration at a certain frequency. So that frequency is being shifted at lower frequency for GS2. This means the vibrating frequency is lesser. If it is lesser, the van der Waals force will be lesser compared to GS1 here. So this tells us the first point from the precursor, how the original nanomaterial is being formed, the first one. The second one, what are the surface functional groups that are present in the sensor material surfaces. And the last characterization techniques is N2 adsorption desorption isotherm. So this tells about the surface structure properties. That is, what is the maximum gas absorbability. We use nitrogen gas here to ensure the surface structure properties. So what is the maximum gas absorbability? It's surface area, pore diameter, and pore volume here. So for GT, the maximum gas absorbability is higher. So in compared to GST, which is 145.15 centimeter cube per gram. So this is the gas absorbability of that particular material. Coming to GS1 and GS2, GS1 possesses double the surface structure properties compared to GS2 here. And all these properties, all these starting from XRD, microscopic images, FTIR, and surface structure properties, indicates us the favorable deployment of these sensor materials for fabrication and further validation here. So graphene oxide by modified Hammers method, graphene tin by 2 different methods, 1 part, 2 part. XRD and FTIR tells us that from the original precursor, the metal oxide has been formed. The surface structure properties, which has high maximum gas absorbability, surface area, pore diameter for the absorption of gas sensing material, implies that it can be used for fabrication and validation. And next we'll discuss about fabrication here. So fabrication basically requires the preparation of paste. Functional phase is the sensor material, and organic binder is a solvent. So 4:1. So there are ratios with which we can mix this sensor material as an organic binder to form a paste, and we need a ceramic or an alumina substrate. Since this chemiresistive sensor works at an elevated temperature, the substrate should have high mechanical strength, should be thermally conductive, and should be chemically inert. So for the temperature to be conducted to the sensor material, we use the alumina substrate, which has high thermal conductivity. So these two are required here. So the fabrication can be done either by physical vapor deposition or chemical vapor deposition. So physical vapor deposition consists of evaporation, molecular beam epitaxy, and sputtering techniques. So we use chemical vapor deposition. The difficulty we faced in physical vapor deposition is we don't have exact control over what is happening inside the instrument, and moreover we cannot optimize much of the parameters that are there in the physical vapor deposition, and it requires a trained technician and dedicated space on all those things. So we go for chemical vapor deposition, where spin and dip coating. Dip coating is nothing but dipping this alumina substrate into the paste. Spin coating is making this alumina substrate spin at a particular RPM and drop this paste on the spinning substrate. So the thickness of this material, the thickness of the coating can be optimized using this formula, where eta is the viscosity of the paste, omega is the angular velocity of the spinning substrate, T is the duration of the substrate. So this is the schematic illustration of the sensor. Here it is 1 centimeter cross 1.2 centimeters. It is like a strip that is present in Accu-Chek blood test which we do at home. It is just a strip. So this is 1 centimeter cross 1 centimeter. The green one here, this is the alumina substrate. The green color here indicates the sensing film. And this is the working diagram of the sensor here. So the ceramic or alumina substrate above which this material sensor material is coated, and we thermally evaporate electrodes on both ends. This is the gold electrode. This is the lithographic process. We mask every other region here so that the gold has been particularly evaporated and deposited only on these two regions. And there is a another component that is present here, PT100, which is used to increase the temperature so that the chemoresistive sensor would work. So this is the fabrication procedure. And for validation, we have two setups, static and dynamic gas sensing setup. Dynamic gas sensing setup replicates the real world environment. But the problem we face is in the dynamic gas sensing setup, if there is an error, we have to go back from the first, and there is not much of a manual control. However, static gas sensing setup, it has been manually controlled. We have a pre-calibrated cylinder. Place the gas stage syringe on the mouthpiece of this pre-calibrated cylinder, turn this. So based on the pressure, this nostril goes back and injected into the static gas sensing chamber. All the sensors has been individually placed here. This is just a schematic illustration. All the 4 sensors has been placed. And this is a acetone pre-calibrated cylinder purchased from Chemtron Science Laboratories in New Delhi. So the desired concentration can be achieved based on this formula. So concentration of vapor in cylinder. So the concentration is 5000 ppm of acetone in 500 ml cylinder here. So concentration of vapor in cylinder, that is 5000 ppm, into quantity of vapor in syringe, 2 ml, 3 ml, 4 ml, like that, and volume of sensor chamber. This is a 250 ml sensor chamber volume. So when it is infused, there is a change in resistance. This is the Keysight data logger, which has a measuring range between few mega ohms to 1000 giga ohms, and this has been connected to a PC to observe the change in resistance after the infusion of acetone from the baseline resistance. So this is the schematic setup of static gas sensing setup. We validated our sensors we fabricated and validated based on the static gas sensing setup. So the first one is IV characteristics. We really wanted to ensure that whether the coated sensor material, the substrate and the gold electrodes is intact. What if it comes out? So for ensuring that, we go for an IV characteristics. IV characteristics we performed at 200 degrees Celsius with a voltage ranging from -5 to +5. So we observed a linear response, which tells us this is ohmic. So ohmic response, that is linear response, indicates that these sensors has good intact, that is the electrode, sensor material and the substrate are in good intact. So here there are differences in sensor response from GS1 to GS2. See, for GS2 alone it is in microamps, for GS1, for all other 3 materials it is in nanoamps. So when we compare GS1 and GS2, the resistance of these 2 materials, nanoamps. So for GS1 it is in mega ohms, 450 mega ohms approximately, and for GS2 it is 250 kilo ohms approximately. So this change in resistance is attributed to the structural characteristics which you have seen. So for GS1 we have seen the SNO2 is uniformly distributed. Here it is agglomerated. See, if it is uniformly distributed, there is a heterojunction, that is graphene tin oxide heterojunction throughout the sensor material here. But however, here the heterojunction is formed here, but here there is no heterojunction. So due to the formation of heterojunction throughout the sensor material, there is a barrier. So due to this barrier, there is no flow of charge carriers. So if there is no flow of charge carriers, the resistance is high. So that is the reason for higher resistance, same material, higher resistance. So if it is in nanoamps, any point if you take R is equal to V by I, for GS1 it will be in approximately in the range of 450 mega ohms. For GS2 it is 250 kilo ohms. So these are the structural as well as the electrical changes which we are talking about in the previous slides. And as at elevated temperature, we have seen at elevated temperature this is operating. We wanted to ensure at what temperature we observe a maximum response here. So we varied from 100 to 350 degrees Celsius, and we infused 5 ppm of acetone vapor to check the response of this. And we found that the 200 degrees Celsius has been highly sensitive for all the four sensors. This is the Arrhenius plot. Arrhenius plot is the rate of change of resistance with respect to temperature in Kelvin. So this Arrhenius plot gives us about the activation energy. Activation energy is the minimum energy required to initiate the reaction between the sensor material as well as the vapor. So here we can observe that 2.897 kilojoules per mole GST for Turner nanocomposite. The activation energy is very less. So at very low activation energy, it can initiate a reaction. Hence, this answers the highest response here for the Turner nanocomposite. And for similarly, this is for GS2. The break here in activation energy for GS2 is this is the activation energy of SNO2 separately, graphene oxide separately and SNO2 separately. However, for GS1, the red curve here, it is 4.037 kilojoules per mole, but average of these two is 16 kilojoules per mole. So the activation energy of GS2 is way beyond GS1, and hence the difference of response between these two materials. So for all other validation purpose, we fixed 200 degrees Celsius since it produces highest response. So we vary the concentration from 0.25 ppm as we go down to 1.8 ppm, 2 ppm like that. So we varied from 0.25 to 30 ppm to check the response of all the four sensors. And this is the linear of response, the same response from 0.25 to 3 ppm. We observed a linear response here. So this is really required for a healthcare application. We have achieved the lower detection limit compared to the TGS 822 sensor, which has a lower detection limit of 50 ppm. So this is really required, and we achieved it. And this is the selectivity characteristics of all the four materials. For GST acetone, it responds to 26, and here for hydrogen sulfate, response is less than 15, and it correspondingly decreases for all this, for all the four materials here. So this is this depends on the dipole moment of this. As acetone has high dipole moment, and the dominant peak which we have seen in XRD 101 for SNO2 and 110 for TiO2, and that is also responsible. So that crystal phase, what it tells us that it consists of a number of oxygen vacancies. These two articles tells us that it consists of a number of oxygen vacancies. So that causes electrical polarization, and it is responsible for high dipole moment interaction. So this dipole moment and the dominant phase are responsible for the selective adsorption of acetone. And the next characteristics is stability characteristics. So for the same 5 ppm acetone at 200 degrees Celsius, we check the response at the same experimental conditions. We repeated at 4 days interval for 30 days. And we observed there is a declination and response for all the four sensors. This may be due to the harsh condition it has been operated. So there is a need to replace the sensor at least once in 2 weeks. At least once in 2 weeks. And next, we wanted to ensure how the sensor responds to the humidity. So as the humidity increases, the response decreases. As the humidity increases, the response of GST, all the four sensors decreases. This is attributed to the competition of absorption between the acetone as well as humidity. And there are numerous other reasons why we will discuss further. There are numerous other reasons why the sensor responses decreases in the presence of humidity. So we need certain humidity compensation method, or we need certain desiccants in the mouthpiece so that the humidity being eliminated. And this is the response and recovery time. So it is 10 seconds, 12 seconds, which is quite fast compared to other literatures and the existing analytical techniques. So by concluding this section, 200 degrees Celsius is the operating temperature with the Turner nanocomposite performing better compared to all other sensors. The relative response is 12.27 to 1 ppm of acetone. And the selectivity is being exploited by the dipole moment on the dominant phase, that is oxygen vacant phases of the sensing film. The response time is 10 seconds. Humidity characteristics tells us that we need a desiccant or a humidity compensation method. Stability characteristics tells us that we need to change the sensors at least once in 2 weeks. And these work got published in two journals. And we go to the next section. How do we really make a portable breath sensors using this? Portable breath sensors by using these sensors. So there are numerous frontline researchers that are working in identifying disease diagnosis. For example, Professor Perrin Goma from Ohio State University has demonstrated a number of portable breath analysis for diabetes, renal disease, lung disease, using the same chemiresistive principle, but all those are in clinical trials. Professor Jose Mayak, who have currently developed a breathalyzer for COVID-19, for diagnosing COVID-19. There are numerous frontline scientists. So they are confident in bringing a baseline model for any of the diseases in a half a decade. So breath analysis can be performed either through online or offline analysis. Offline analysis is here there's a desiccant here to eliminate the humidity. This is a silica gel which comes in the packing of an electronic components. We place the silica gel here. The patient blows and we collect it in the Tiddler bag. And similar to the static gas sensing setup, we take it in the gas stage syringe and give it as an input to study the response of the breath print. An online measurement is the direct blow of the breath print into the prototype. And this is the working principle of the prototype. So we measure the resistance of these sensors in air, and the sensors, the 450 megaohms which we are talking about in the IE characteristics roughly. And this is the resistance at threshold acetone concentration. So this is we use a voltage divider circuit. This resistance at threshold concentration is kept at the other leg, and this is S1, S2, and S3. So, and there are corresponding LEDs for all the sensors. So what is basic working principle is, if the resistance goes below this 1.8 ppm, that is for the resistance of GS, if it goes below 40 megaohms, it means that the concentration of the breath sample that has been infused, that has been blown, is higher than 1.8 ppm. If it is higher, the patient is prone to diabetes. So this corresponding LED glows. Accordingly, LED 2 and 3 for other two sensors. And we took 30 healthy and 30 diabetic with varying age, sex, HbA1c, weight, all these anthropometrical measurements. And we used an inclusion criteria age between 18 to 90. We excluded patients with, pregnant ladies breastfeeding and lactating women. Since our focus is primarily on diagnosing diabetes, classifying healthy and diabetic people, we used we eliminated patients with other comorbid conditions. And this is the typical response of the breath samples from offline measurement. That is, the patient tend to blow in a Tiddler bag. We take a gas stage syringe and inject it. So this is the saturation voltage. That is the typical response of all the three sensors. This is the saturation voltages here. So as the HbA1c value increases, as the fasting and blood glucose value increases, the saturation voltage also increases. So to identify these differences clearly, what we did is we took this saturation voltage of the three sensors and we plotted separately for healthy and diabetic patients, fasting and postprandial, both the conditions. So the average response of all these sensor value is 1.1 times, that is 10% higher for diabetic subjects compared to healthy subjects. This is very minimal. This is 10% for 60 subjects is very minimal, but we are further working on it to improve this. There is a 10% increase. There is a definite increase. So with the biochemical test report HbA1c and the sensor indices, that is, we have totally 6 sensor indices for sensor 1 fasting and postprandial, sensor 2 fasting postprandial, sensor 3 fasting and postprandial, totally 6 sensor indices, and we identified which sensor indices is statistically significant to the biochemically measured golden standard method. And so based on the statistical significance, we framed an empirical relationship. So substituting the response of S1 in postprandial, response of S2 in postprandial, response of S3 in fasting condition, and age in this formula, we estimated the HbA1c using non-invasive method. So this is the estimated HbA1c, this is the measured HbA1c, and we plotted, we observed a linear correlation of 0.88 with a manual binary classification accuracy of 65%. And this is the response of the portable prototype. So this corresponds to LED1. That is sensor 1, LED1, LED2, and LED3. So for 30 diabetic subjects which you have took, so the LED corresponding to sensor 1 has glown for 20 subjects. The remaining 10, it remains off for the remaining 10 diabetic subjects. And similarly, for 30 healthy subjects which you have studied, it does not glow. For healthy subjects, it should remain off. The LED should remain off based on the principle. So for 16 subjects, it remained off. For another 14, it glowed. So that is false negatives and false positive. But the accuracy is 61.11, 50.79, 69.64. The combined accuracy is 60.51. So we have achieved through offline measurement 65%. Through online measurement is 60.51%. So to improve this, we have to work on the breath print. So this work has been published in Journal of Breath Research, and we have filed a patent for the portable prototype. So this is the feature extraction and classification of healthy and diabetic breath print. So there are numerous studies. So they had extracted features from the breath print from pulmonary infection, sleep apnea, and there are numerous classification models that have been used. So we framed a workflow accordingly. So we denoise the signal and we baseline manipulated. As if it is not being baseline manipulated, the saturation voltage may vary from patient to patient. So we baseline manipulated and we extracted 13 absorption kinetic related features for individual for each and every patient for 3 sensors. So totally it is 39 features for each and every breath print, and we classified using the existing techniques, that is Naice, Bayes, and all those existing machine learning algorithms. So this denoising and feature extraction is being done using a Python programming language. These are the basic formulas. So these 13 features are extracted from the initial voltage, that is the baseline voltage, which we have manipulated, and it is somewhere around 0.393 voltage. And the final voltage is this one here, final voltage and the saturation voltage. Based on 3 voltages, we have extracted 13 features, the log, the variance, integral, difference, and slope maximum of all those curves. So this we have utilized by Python programming language, and the feature selection and classification algorithm is performed using Weka, W-E-K-A, that is an open source software. So we can import all these features there. There will be a drop down menu. If we select it, based on the algorithm, it will rank the features and it will classify accordingly. So here I have tabulated only the features for sensor S1, the 13 features for sensor S1. The mean and standard deviation of 30 healthy subjects and the mean and standard deviation of 30 diabetic subjects with student t-test significance, and it is ranking among the 13. Variance has been ranked first by distinction index and integral has been ranked first by 1R. So these are the ranking of this particular sensor. So from this table, the basic absorption is the absorption kinetic features, that is still L1 and D1. The absorption kinetic features are highly ranked compared to the initial voltage and the final voltage. Since we baseline manipulated, there is a change in all these voltages here. So the absorption kinetic features answered best for distinguishing healthy and diabetic breath print. This is just the significance definition here. So slope M1, which is low ranked here, and integral S1, which is highly ranked here. So here there is a clear discrimination here. Even though it is not linear, there is a discrimination between the red dots and the green dots here. But here it is completely merged here, and there is no. So this is the answer. This is the reason for low student t-test significance and high significance for integral, low for S1. So based on this 1R feature selection and distinction index feature selection algorithm, the accuracy. So without feature selection, it is 68.33. With feature selection, it is 70. Without it is 39 features. With feature selection, is 24 features. And further, the feature selected by distinction index, it provides the same accuracy before feature selection, but the complexity of the algorithm would reduce as the number of features would reduce. So this is the confusion matrix of all these 3 algorithms here. So based on this confusion matrix, we have calculated the accuracy, sensitivity, and specificity. So with the help of absorption kinetic features, we improved the classification accuracy of diagnosing diabetes from original 65% from offline measurement to 70%. So we are further working on it, and by summarizing graphene-based binary and terminal nanocomposite was synthesized, it is fabricated, and all the sensor parameters has been validated, incorporated in a portable sensor, obtained the breath print, extracted features, and using machine learning algorithm, we classified it. So these are the suggestions for future work. Each and every section we have discussed, there is scope to improvise. For example, first, there are nowadays there are not a single sensor, there are nano sensor array. That is in a single substrate, 1 centimeter, 1 centimeter we are talking about. Instead of coating a single method, we mask each and every area. And on the 1 centimeter or 1 centimeter, there are 4 or 5 different coating material that has been present. So what happens is, for each and every patient, similarly, like a fingerprint, the breath print would vary for individual person. So nowadays there are a lot of improvement in the sensor technologies. Instead of placing a heater, room temperature sensors are available based on the visible light at elevated temperature. Right, there is energy required to initiate the reaction. That energy can be provided by an UV light or a visible light. So that kind of technology has been emerging currently. And this micro pre-concentrator is another technique. This has been done globally. This micro pre-concentrator, they separate acetone alone and they use the original GCMS to measure the quantity instead of this nano sensor. So there are numerous scopes. Each and every section there is a scope to improvise. The breath collection also. So there may be certain loss in the Tedlar bag. Instead, if there is a fluid delivery system in the same lab on chip, there won't be any loss of compounds here. So there are a lot of scope to work on this further. So we are working to improve our accuracy from 70% and deploy it in clinical trial. So this is what I was talking about. So the breath-borne VOC biomarkers for COVID-19. So here with the original GCMS, they had identified that ethyl butanate COVID-19 patients tend to exhale ethyl butanate higher compared to normal patients, and they had developed a breathalyzer within the span of 5 months to measure to diagnose whether the patient is suffering from COVID or not. So this is a remarkable finding in a short span of time, and I would like to this procedure would be followed for all the disease and all the diagnosis procedures. Thank you. Any discussion we can start it from.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ramji. That was a very, very elaborative and very nicely said. And I think Jane Prabhu Thomas, you have raised your hand. You have any questions, you can turn on your mic and talk to him.
Good evening, ma'am and doctor. A wonderful session. I have a question. Shall I ask frankly? Actually,
Yes, yes.
I am not from this area. I am from management side, but I interested to join and I learned lot of things from explanation. So frankly and overall, I have a question. Shall I ask it?
Yeah, sure. Please proceed.
Yeah, doctor. Yeah, as we discussed, as you said about the diabetics, I heard recently I read one article and one other also explained. You also would have seen the video. Said uh, actually the diabetic measurement before fasting and after fasting.
Okay.
10 to 15 years before, it was very high, around 10 to 15 point higher than nowadays. So it is very predetermined, which done by the corporate people. So the other hand said, is it true or false, doctor? Just frankly I'm asking.
Yeah. You have definitely we have to address this. So being the blood glucose being an uncertain one, we do not blame on corporate. We have to go on the guidelines given by the World Health Organization. So okay, let it be. As you said, that there is a difference. So this is what that has been stated from 2003, not 4 or 5 years back. For more than 17 years, they are using this diagnostic characteristics. So even I had the same question you had, but we don't have the answer for that. That is the fact, actually. So this is the guidelines given by World Health Organization, and we all are following it.
Okay. Thank you, doctor.
Okay, thank you.
Prabhu, you're still in Maldives.
Okay, thank you.
Prabhu,
Sorry, ma'am.
you're still
Yes,
in
ma'am.
Maldives?
Yeah. I'm still in Maldives. I'm working in the college only, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nice of you. And any other participant, if you have any doubt, please, you have a wonderful person here who is a researcher.
Thank you, ma'am.
Anyone who would like to talk to him?
Good evening, sir.
Yes.
Sir, I am Johnsy Johnson. Though I am not related to medical field, I want to ask a question. Other than this COVID-19 and diabetes, any other diseases can be diagnosed through this system?
Yes.
Breath analysis?
Not specifically this. Based on these technologies, it can be done, ma'am. Actually, there is an instrument named Nephrolex. You can Google it, ma'am. Nephrolex. So that it has been in existence for the past 5 years, and still it is in clinical trial to diagnose the efficiency of kidney transplantation and Basically on the renal disease, they are currently using it for clinical. There are numerous portable instruments, ma'am. There is an UK-based company named Owlstone Medical Private Limited, Owlstone. So the CEO Billy Boyle, he started it due to his loss of his wife due to the cancer. So he is very positive in early detection of cancer, and he has a team around the globe and he is working. Even Professor Hossam Hayek, who has identified breathalyzer for COVID, he is in collaboration with this Owlstone Medical. And currently there are openings as well. And from 2016, there are more than 9 startups around the globe. So people are working and they are very confident in bringing this into market as soon as possible.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much for your kind information. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Can you stop sharing your screen, Dr. Ramji?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So that was a wonderful session. I was very happy to hear about all your research findings. And at this stage, you have done a lot of work, and I also wish you to proceed further with a lot of more works. It's not only getting the PhD degree. Actually, I feel once you receive the PhD degree, that is the time when you start learning. That will be the foundation, and we still have to construct a lot of things. And definitely in biomedical, only in recent years, like biomedical engineering has become a little familiar to everybody, and a lot of people have a lot of inhibitions. What will be the scope? What will be the future if we take up biomedical engineering? Because all these research facilities are there available only abroad. Even if you want to do some research, after BE, definitely they need to be prepared to travel abroad and spend a lot of time in order to reach certain level. So now you have proved that you can do a lot of things in India itself, and a lot of scope is there because we have both medical and engineering combination in biomedical. So definitely the future.
They have computer science as well, ma'am.
Doctors. Healthcare is going to be very, very essential, and for which the doctors need the proficiency and help and support of engineers. So biomedical field is going to definitely rock on, and it's going to be a future. And work on researching on all these things. We have very limited people now, and definitely a lot of work has to be done because the doctors may not be able to do a lot of things what engineers do. There should be a hand-in-hand collaboration to get a proper outcome, and there is nothing like one profession can survive alone. Everybody should guide each other, and we should work together. So there should be an understanding between all the technologies and all the professions, and we should bring the best out of whatever knowledge we gain from our education. And thank you so much. And audience, I'm very happy that you all joined today, and we are going to have a session on Saturday, that is regarding Industry 4.0. So I wish every one of you register for that. And the speaker is a very versatile speaker, 30 years experienced speaker. And you will be gaining a lot of insights from his session. His name is Engineer Chokkaiah. And he's a certified QS 9000 2015 lead auditor and a Lean Six Sigma black belt certifier. And also he is now a quality and management consultant doing a lot of training and mentoring and specializing on lean and productivity improvement projects. He's an expert on lean. And he's going to talk about Industry 4.0 because everybody talk about this fancy word, Industry 4.0. Let us know what it really means and what are the different types of industry revolution, what are the components and the characteristics of Industry 4.0, and what are the critical skills that is required for Industry 4.0. And in general for industries, what is the requirement to become an Industry 4.0 company, and all the applications of Industry 4.0, advantages and disadvantages of Industry 4.0. He is going to have a thorough session on this, and there is no branch related segregation. Every one of us have to learn this and have an awareness about what is Industry 4.0. So don't forget, I will send you the link for registering for this webinar. It is on Saturday, 5 p.m. And in between, I would try to do a webinar for you people if possible. I'm going to do it on critical thinking, and I will post you if at all I'm going to have it before Saturday, else in the next week, definitely. And happy to all have you all. Because of you only all these things are happening. And thank you once again, Dr. Ramji. God bless you, and all the well wishes for you. And you should go to a great place. You have a lot of scope in this area, and you have good knowledge. You have good patience, and you proved yourself as a researcher. And keep working on it. And I'll be the very happiest person to see you in great heights. Thank you so much. Thank you for your patient hearing. And good evening and bye. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I've posted the feedback link. Please give your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Prabhu. Be there for all the webinars, Prabhu.
Yeah, sure, ma'am. Thank you.